We always invite you to become a member. You can do that on wildones.org. That's our national organization. And the money goes towards supporting our chapter and also Wild Ones National. You'll receive the Wild Ones Journal, and you'll also find that National is doing more and more for us. So it's just been a terrific year, and we're just doing more and more together. It's great. You would be surprised that all of us were reelected for the board. You're just going to have to, I was taking this picture, so I'm not in it, but I'll just quickly tell you. Joe Crow, he's our webmaster and Zoom master. Liz Wendland is our secretary and membership. Erica Middle Tenbrook is our service project person. And then Steve in the black shirt is Steve Fester is our treasurer. Eric Bay is our resident naturalist and also our vice president. One of the things that Wild Ones National has done for us this past year, and a little more than that, is create this brochure and on the website designs for different locations around the country. And part of that process is also included having these designers give presentations. And Carmen Simonet did the design for the Minneapolis area, and she's just a terrific designer. And the other designers we've had, architects, have been also very interesting. One thing that Wild Ones does, maybe you know or don't know about, but we run a photo contest at the national level, and we had 2 winners from our chapter. Joan Brandwine, just a gorgeous view of the conservatory. And Karen Ekman, this is a picture of one of our service projects. We watch over a garden, a native garden at Island Lakes Elementary School in Shoreview. And that's one of our members there working away. So just a quick overview of the schedule. We have lots coming up. February 6th, we're planning to have a seed exchange from 1 to 3. And it is something you'll need to register for on our website. And it'll be held at the Crows. And then once you register, they'll send you the address and a little more information. And we'll have one of our lightning talks tonight is about the seed exchange. This is a picture from, when did we do this? Last time around, it was about a little over a year ago. I could be wrong about the date, but. And then coming up also, as Eric happened to mention, Neil Dibble will be giving a presentation through Wild Ones National. Highly recommend his talk. I just listened to one that was on YouTube that he did the other day, and just very interesting. He is an ecologist, prairie ecologist, and he's runs Prairie Nursery in Wisconsin. That same night, this is a double header for us. It happens to be that the thing I mentioned a little bit in our pre-chat was we're going to be doing combined chapter meetings for 3 months, starting with Rebecca McMacken. She's the director of the Brooklyn Bridge Park, I believe it's called. And Heather Holm from Prairie Edge Wild Ones is the person who has connected with these different speakers. And I think we're going to have a really terrific spring, and I'm very excited about it. And this is, in a sense, in lieu of the Design with Nature conference that we used to have. So being able to have national level speakers come to our chapters if we work together is going to be kind of fun. So that night it's going to be a 6 o'clock Neil Dibble, and then 7 o'clock Rebecca. Neil for sure will be recorded, so you'll be able to see that on the YouTube channel of Wild Ones National. I don't know if we've got it figured out if we'll be recording Rebecca or not. In March, it'll be Marcy and Mike O'Connor talking about the restoration of their Wisconsin farm. In April, Nancy Lawson, if you're familiar with her book, The Humane Gardener, just the approach of gardening with natives for wildlife. So we have a great spring series, and this is just a quick overview again of the dates. These will be on our website. You can always go to bigriverbigwoods.org. And if you have a question, you can always send us a message at contact@bigriverbigwoods.org. Does anybody need more time with that schedule? You can always look it up. Tonight, we have seeds, weeds, birds, and plant families. And our speakers will be in this order. We'll start with John, and John is up next.
Erica said it was hard to hear me. Can you hear me okay? I put on a headset.
Yeah, I think I hear you just fine.
Okay. All right.
Much better.
Okay, great. Okay, so.
Am I done sharing, you guys? Did mine go away? Joe, did it?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, you're good.
Great. Welcome, John.
Okay, thank you. Mine is about why I'm passionate about saving seeds. I don't have a long history of saving native plant seeds. I've only been a member of Wild Ones for about 5 years, but I do come from a family of gardeners. My grandfather and father both grew vegetables and flowers and saved some seed. I was mainly a vegetable gardener, and I planted seed because I could select the varieties that I wanted to grow. However, many of the vegetables I grew were hybrids, so you couldn't save the seed and get the same plant the following year. I heard about open pollinated heirloom seeds from a connection with Seed Savers Exchange, and I liked all the different varieties of vegetables that they had, as well as their goal of protecting the biodiversity of our food system. So when I heard about Wild Ones, it was a natural fit for me to expand this seed saving passion to our Minnesota native flowers, grasses, and trees. So tonight I'll list 6 different reasons that I save native seeds. Money. As you know, seeds are cheaper than plants, sometimes even free from a friend or wild collected, or from a seed library like the White Bear Lake Seed Library. This summer I turned our front yard into a native garden. I raised over 250 plants from seed, which saved me lots of money. I really like that money doesn't have to be an obstacle to anyone who wants to garden. Safety. With the arrival of the highly invasive Asian jumping worms, it's no longer recommended to share plants with soil on the roots. And yes, that's a picture from my yard, unfortunately. I was so disappointed when I discovered one in my yard because I loved giving away plants. It was so easy to divide a plant, dig out a new seedling, throw it in a pot and give it to somebody. But at least with the saving of seeds, we still have a safe option for sharing plants. Connection. Sharing seeds and plants has been a really fun way for me to connect with others. I'm frequently out in my front yard working in the gardens, and often people stop by and we talk plants. Advocacy. The summer that I turned my turf grass into mostly gardens, I removed many non-native plants, threw them in a pot and set them out at the curb, where they promptly disappeared very fast. I realized I was giving away plants I didn't value any longer. So now when removed, non-natives end up in the compost. When I give away a plant, I want it to be native so that every seed or plant I give is a vote for a healthier ecosystem. Learning. By saving seeds and growing them out, I've learned a lot about some of the native plant varieties. For example, I find seedling identification very hard in the spring when stuff is coming up all over. So if I put a few seeds in a pot, label it, watch it germinate, it gives me a great idea of what the plant looks like, as well as an easy way to move them around. Even when the seeds don't grow that well, it's still an opportunity to learn more about the plant's light, soil, and moisture needs. And then at the harvesting stage, it gets you up close and personal with the plant at a very different stage in its growth. And finally, stewardship. As Americans, we often think in terms of ownership, even in the realm of plants, with companies patenting cultivar varieties. However, I view our plants and seeds as gifts from a creator, shifting my role to one of stewardship. I take great joy in trying to preserve our wonderful Minnesota native plants, not only for my use, but for future generations as well. So if you do not already save your seeds, I encourage you this summer to collect and pass them on to somebody else, this great gift of life. Now we're shifting to a little info commercial here. As Eva mentioned, our seed exchange is coming up on February the 26th, so get that on your calendar, 1 to 3. If you register, you will receive directions, so go to bigriverbigwoods.org and click on events. Eva already showed this next picture of last year. Joe and Carol also hosted it. The next picture, I think, is some masked person donating some seeds. Just remember, you don't have to bring seeds to share. We have over 50 varieties already available. And then remember to wear a mask, and you may want to bring some small bags or envelopes and something to label them with, so you can identify the seeds when you take them home. And also, of course, bring your questions. If this whole winter sowing thing is something that's new to you, you can talk to somebody. So we hope to see you at the Seed Exchange on February 6th.
John, are you open to taking a question or two?
Sure.
All right. In the chat from Liz, she has 2 questions. What is your favorite plant to grow from seed? And then also, what has been the most successful for you?
Well, my yard loves lobelias, so I don't even have to do anything. I just have to keep the soil clear, and it's in a moist spot on clay, and I literally could shove a shovel underneath it and have lobelia sod. It's just that thick. So it's like, once again, match the plant to the site, and I do lobelias.
Is that also your favorite one, or do you have a one you really like to grow from seed?
I hadn't thought of that question. There's so many. I like partridge pea and annual. I also am a big mulcher, because I was in the earlier stages of trying to keep down the weeds as I expanded my garden, and it grows right through my mulch really nice.
Awesome.
And it's really easy to save too.
Yeah, that's a really nice one. Those are the only questions I see right now. So thanks, John.
Should I share my screen now?
Yes, sorry, I was just busy unmuting.
Okay.
Erica Tenbrook will be our next presenter.
Hello, everybody. Can you see my screen? Yes? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
So this is a little bit of a, I guess, a foray into the animal world, because I love animals. Everybody knows that I'm kind of crazy about animals. I'm a biologist. And I work at the Wildlife Rehabilitation Clinic on Saturdays. And so I decided to talk about cedar waxwings and the plants that we need in the environment to support them. And I just think they're absolutely adorable little birds. We have 2 types of waxwings in Minnesota, the Bohemian waxwings and then the cedar waxwings. And Bohemian waxwings are mainly up north, so occasionally they'll flock with the cedar waxwings. But cedar waxwings you should see around the city. And I totally recommend, if you find an injured or sick or even orphaned wild animal, to bring it to the WRC. It's located on Dale Street by Central Park in Roseville. And I've actually volunteered there for 40 years. It's kind of crazy. So cedar waxwings are pretty common. I think this last summer, I don't have the numbers, but we looked in the computer, and in 2020, there were 89 cedar waxwings admitted in the summer, and 62 of those were nestlings. So those were all raised and released then in fall and early winter. So window strikes admits are common in the spring and the fall. And so I totally recommend getting something for your large picture windows to prevent that from happening. Window alert stickers are pretty good. And cedar waxwings, they tend to like those trees and shrubs that have berries right next to big windows. So often admitted for damage to their spinal cord. So cedar waxwings, they like open forests and forest edges. They make, I guess they don't ever visit the feeders. From what I understand, rarely do you see any of these birds at feeders. Has anybody here ever seen a cedar waxwing in their yard? I guess I can't see the hands up or down, so I'll just have to assume that there aren't very many. Cedar waxwings tend to perch at the top of really tall trees, so you hear them before you see them. They nest at the edge of woodlands and lake shores, and they might nest in smaller trees and shrubs, and their nests are really pretty. They often will weave in little bits of fabric, and they have little speckled eggs. And the cedar waxwing itself has very smooth feathers. It has a little daub of red on the outside, maybe 5 or 6 wing feathers, and then yellow stripe at the bottom of its tail. And it's really difficult to tell the male from the female, but the male has a little bit of a darker chin and maybe is a little bit more brightly colored. Okay, so they have this high, thin, and shrill call that's really, it makes it easy to identify where the big groups of waxwings are. And it sort of sounds like a robin at dusk, if you've ever heard that call. So sometimes you'll see cedar waxwings at bird baths, but you won't see them at the feeders again because they're not much of a seed eater. They like flying insects, red berries. They like all fruit, but they really like red. And then they often will eat ash blossoms in the early spring for the protein. So they have wanderlust. They're really nomadic. They fly in groups to find food. They seem to eat all the fruit on one tree or one shrub and then fly on. And they have this interesting trait. It's a social trait. Does anybody know what it is? Is there anybody who knows much about cedar waxwings? Okay, so I don't see anybody responding. Oh, maybe Eric, do you know?
A courtship trait?
Yes.
I don't think I do actually know that for waxwings.
So they play past the berry. It's a little bit like the courtship traits for some other birds where they pass it back and forth between the male and the female, but instead they're in a big group at the top of the tree and they pass the berry around the whole group and then one of them eats it. And it's as if they're playing. So it's one of the identifying traits of a cedar waxwing. I'm having trouble advancing my slides there. Okay, so another interesting trait of cedar waxwings is that they're just variable migrators. So they're either short or long distance migrators, depending upon where they live, and they might not migrate at all. So they arrive at Minnesota breeding sites April to June, and then they tend to migrate at the end of August through mid-December. I recommend looking at eBird. It's really a great site to learn more about the migration characteristics for different birds. So eastern cedar waxwings are a little bit different. They tend to winter down south, either in the southeastern United States or Costa Rica or Panama. So in the Midwest, however, they may stick around if they have enough food. So you can see them in the lower half of Minnesota and sometimes even in the north. So some of the fruiting shrubs and trees for cedar waxwings. In the spring and summer, of course, they love the red fruit, the prunus, the serviceberries, elderberries, especially red elderberries, and then dogwoods, which don't have red berries. Now the fall, I want to focus more on the fall and the winter because of this releasing the infants in the fall. It's when I released 3 of the birds in December, it was kind of sad. I was looking all over the place for some place to release these little babies. They have to be released into a group of cedar waxwings in some place where there's shelter and food. And all I could find were crabapple trees and no cedar waxwings. So I released the 3 together in a cedar tree, actually near some crabapples, and hopefully they found enough fruit. So I encourage you to plant some of these trees, such as the ashes, the mountain ash, or the showy mountain ash, or just the regular mountain ash. Neither of them are affected by the ash borer, which is nice. And these are small trees, small to medium trees, and found in central and northern Minnesota. They typically in native areas are found in open canopied forests, swamp forests, lake shores, lake bluffs. And you might see them along the shore of Lake Superior. I guess there's quite a few of the showy mountain ash around Lake Superior. And the fruits might be held into the winter. And I have one of these trees in my front yard, and that fruit just disappears right away. And I saw in the chat window that Karen Ekman says that the cedar waxwings love the mountain ash berries as well in her yard. So American mountain ash is a little bit more open tree. It's also found in the Twin Cities, and it also has those showy red berries. And interestingly, I did not realize this till I looked at the map for American mountain ash. It's a native for Minnesota way in the northeast. So it in nature, it likes cooler forests and bluffs and moist areas around swamp edges or stream banks. So I would guess that global warming is probably going to affect this mountain ash more than the showy mountain ash. And the food is really important for all migrating birds. So one thing to remember is there's a European mountain ash. It has a hairier underside to its leaf, and it looks super similar, especially to the showy mountain ash. However, the fruit is not liked as well by the birds. I think it's held longer into the winter for that reason. And it's not native, so it probably doesn't support the same insects. And it can hybridize with both the American and the showy mountain ash. There's 2 dogwoods that hold their fruit a little longer or fruit later. The pagoda dogwood is one I totally recommend. And I know there have been people who've talked about this to us before. The leaves are beautiful. The tree is beautiful. It's a good landscape plant. And the fruit is pretty. It has these beautiful red stems that hold darker berries. And the cedar waxwings are probably drawn in by the red stems to the fruit. They just love these berries. And it grows well in partial shade to full sun, ripens late summer to early fall. And does anybody know how to get rid of this window on the bottom? Oh, here. Sorry, I could never see what the slide looked like. So I'm just talking by memory. Okay, so it grows well in deciduous and mixed forests and floodplains and thickets. So there's one other dogwood that fruits a little bit later. Does anybody recognize this dogwood? I'm sure everybody probably does. Anybody?
Is that the red twig?
That's correct, yes. Yay, Joe. It's red osier dogwood. And this is another nice landscaping plant. It's beautiful in the winter right now, and you'll see it around swamps in the Twin Cities. And it does, as it gets older, it might get leggy or a little bit grayer, and you can cut those gray big branches out and rejuvenate the shrub pretty easily. You can also trim it back or let the deer trim it back, and it'll come right back in the spring. It has white berries, so it's one of the exceptions. Again, the other thing about this shrub is that it can actually fruit twice in a season. I haven't seen it do that in my yard though. It flowers early and then a little bit later, and I think sometimes there aren't enough pollinators to pollinate the flowers earlier, but you could get two batches of fruit from this. So another shrub that's really loved by the cedar waxwings is American highbrush cranberry. And there's 2 variants that we find in the Twin Cities. It's used to be called Viburnum trilobum, and that included both of these variants. And that was kind of a mix-up. I think that variant opulus, the European variant, got planted a lot in natural areas because people thought it was actually native. It's got big groups of berries that get held later into this winter. So it's pretty in the landscape. The variant Americana, actually the fruit disappears pretty rapidly. So I think a freeze thaw makes this fruit the European fruit more palatable for the birds. So try to get the variant Americana if you can. I think most of the native plant nurseries only offer this variant now. They both have beautiful white flowers in the spring. So they're very similar. In fact, this picture doesn't do the Americana variant justice. It has bigger leaves like the variant opulus as well. And I do have just one non-shrub in here. This is the riverbank grape. It's riverbank grapevine, and it grows in part shade to sun, average to moist soil. It tends to be found in riverbanks, floodplain forests, wooded swamps, fence rows, and woodland edges. And I think it gets a bad rap because it tends to smother trees, but you can grow it along fence rows like a metal fence. It can cover it up and look really pretty, and the leaves turn red in the fall, so it's really beautiful then. And then the fruit is really loved by the birds. Some people say that it gets a lot of Japanese beetles, but I have not seen that in my yard. And instead I've seen this riverbank grapevine beetle, which is kind of like a June bug. It's really cool. Okay, I think a few more. I don't know why, but I'm having trouble advancing slides. Okay, so I have a couple more shrubs to show you that actually have black fruit. The nannyberry is another viburnum that's loved by the cedar waxwings. It grows in moist, well-drained soil, partial shade to full sun, and again ripens summer to early fall, and it has these black drupes of fruit. And if you grow it more in the shade, it gets a little bit darker leaves. I think it gets a little bleached in the sunlight. And there's another shrub that looks much like it that, sorry, I'm trying to advance the slide again. So does anybody recognize this shrub? It looks a lot but like the nannyberry and grows in the same kind of situation.
Black chokeberry.
Yes, absolutely. And Eva commented just recently that black chokeberries are found over by the Roseville Library, and they seem to hold their fruit all winter and into the spring. And so we kind of decided it must be a variant that either isn't native, or it's the location that makes it not so exciting for the birds. Because I have 3 of these shrubs in my yard, and I tell you, the birds just eat the berries immediately after they mature. And it's super beautiful in the fall. It has bright red leaves. And then these berries, they're really pretty. One way you can tell the difference between this and a nannyberry is it has little star shapes at the bottom of the fruit. And another thing is the leaves look more like buckthorn leaves. So they're a little bit rounder. But otherwise they grow in similar conditions, part shade to full sun, moist, well-drained soil. Does anybody recognize this shrub? This is another one that draws in the cedar waxwings in the winter. It grows around homes. It's a good landscaping shrub.
It's
Maybe
a
anybody?
Taxus.
Taxus, yes. It's a yew. Canadian yew, Taxus canadensis. So it's really hard in the Twin Cities to get a Canadian yew. I think Outback Nursery and some of the native nurseries might carry them. They're probably pretty small. But the regular nurseries, they only carry the Japanese yew as far as I can tell. So you might have to search for it. The birds love them. They love to hide in these in the winter, and they love the red berries, but they actually are eating the little seed inside of that berry and not the berry itself. So let's talk just a little bit about shrubs that hold their fruit into the winter, and then I'll be done. Anybody recognize this shrub, or small tree rather?
It's a
I think
juniper.
prairie enthusiasts don't like it too much.
It's some kind of a juniper.
Absolutely.
Red
What
cedar.
kind?
Red cedar.
Yep. That's somebody who knows their trees and shrubs. It's the eastern red cedar. So it looks a lot like white cedar, but white cedar has cones. Eastern red cedar has blueberries like other junipers. And the cedar waxwing is named after the eastern red cedar. So I guess it's pretty forgiving shrub. It looks a little bit prettier in the spring and summer than it does in the winter. It kind of turns brown in the winter. And it grows in part shade to sun. It loves sandy and rocky soil. And you'll see it in prairies, old fields, fence rows, slopes, wood roadsides, and open woods and swamps. And it grows really easily. So if you want to attract cedar waxwings, that's a great small tree to plant, or hedgerow to plant. We have surprisingly 2 hollies in Minnesota. I guess I didn't realize there were 2 until I looked on Minnesota wildflowers. So winterberry holly is really loved by cedar waxwings because of its red fruit. It grows in eastern Minnesota in particular, but I've seen it in central Minnesota in natural areas. The shrubs can be small, or they can get as tall as 20 feet. And they like it a little moister. So you'll see them by bogs, thickets, swamps, shores, and ditches. And the fruits are variable size, bright red. So they really draw in the birds. And one thing to remember about some of these shrubs, often they'll have bark that looks like buckthorn. So if you're cutting down buckthorn in the fall or winter, be aware that some of the bark, that this type, winterberry holly has bark that's very similar to buckthorn. Okay, so I'm almost done. Fireberry hawthorn is another shrub I would totally recommend. It's one of the most common of the hawthorns in Minnesota. I guess we have 12 species, and I'm told that they're very difficult to tell the difference between. So this one, it has multiple stems and the thorns I think tend to be closer to the base. It has beautiful white flowers, and then these red fruits that look like, I guess they look like rose hips or crab apples. So totally recommend that. You have to be a little careful about the thorns. And then crab apples. Crab apples, of course, even though I said they're almost the only one you can find for cedar waxwings, I still recommend crab apples, especially the prairie crab or the Malus ionesis. This is the Minnesota native. It's also found in Wisconsin. And Doug Ptolemy commented in one of his talks and also in some of his books that the non-native and the native crab apples actually are closely related in leaf chemistry. So they draw in some of the same insects. And of course, they support a wide variety of moths and butterflies. And their summer blossoms, or spring and summer blossoms, draw in all the pollinators. So in the case of a crab apple, I'm okay with people getting a non-native. I probably will get expelled from wild ones for saying that, but I do like the fact that they support so many birds in the winter. And they have varying fruiting times. So you can go, I recommend going to the newsletter at Johnson Nursery, Wisconsin, their website. They talk about all the different crab apples, when they bloom and when their fruits mature, because they can mature at different times, and some will carry their fruit through the winter, but not very many. So if you can find native Minnesota crab apple, again, I can't advance my slide there. Okay, so this is what it looks like. It's a small tree with pretty pink blossoms. It grows in open woods, thickets, stream banks, so it requires full sun. If you can find it, that would be great to plant. Okay, and roses are also liked by cedar waxwings. The big red rose hips that are carried into the winter. And they're high in vitamin C, so good for humans too. This is the smooth meadow rose, Rosa blanda. It's a beautiful backdrop. It's the most common of all of our roses. We have 4 in Minnesota. And one identifying characteristic is that it doesn't have bristles near the fruit in the upper branches, but it does have bristles on the lower stems. And it also is somewhat rhizomatous, so you might want to put it at the back of your property if you plant this type of rose. It flowers in May to June, has really pretty blossoms, and it can grow in the shade. Actually, I have one in full shade and it still produces fruit. Okay. So 2 more plants, I think. The sumacs. Sumacs are really great for all wildlife, and especially for cedar waxwings and even robins in the winter. And staghorn and smooth sumac look really similar. They grow by the sides of the roads, and you've probably seen these stags of fruit. The way you can tell them apart is staghorn sumac is hairy. So the fruits are all hairy, and there's hairy stems. And then smooth sumac, which grows under the same conditions, has smooth fruit and smooth stags and smoother branches. They both bloom in June to July, and they like dry to average moisture, and they're beautiful red plants in the fall. And the fruit is really important for all sorts of mammals and also for the birds in the winter. So that's what I have, and I want to give credit to Katie and Peter from Minnesota Wildflowers for these beautiful pictures. Most of them were from them, and Katie gave me permission to put them in the slide presentation. I recommend going to their website for all sorts of information about these trees and shrubs and other wildflowers. And then I have a couple images, especially the birds that were uncopyrighted or free to the public, and or from the University of Wisconsin. And if you want to find these types of native plants, I recommend talking to the people that are here from Natural Shore Technologies about the best places. And then some of the places I've gotten trees and shrubs are Landscape Alternatives, Outback Nursery in Hastings. They have a wide variety of trees and shrubs. And Prairie Resto, Prairie Moon Nursery. And if you live in Wisconsin or have a cabin in Wisconsin, Prairie Nursery is really good. So that's it. Do you have any questions?
There were quite a few comments, and then there was one question, although I went and answered some of it in the chat, but if you have any experience with it too. The question was, any sightings of cedar waxwings feasting on Virginia creeper berries or grape species? And just so you know, I did put some things about that too, but I don't know if you have any personal observations.
I think they would eat both, but I haven't personally seen them eating them. I would imagine Virginia creeper, especially. Other grapes, you mean like non-native grapes? Is that what you meant?
It wasn't specified. I don't know, Martina, if you want to.
Yeah, not necessarily. I was thinking more of the native grapes, but you had a slide about the river grape, I believe. So thank you for that.
Yeah, they do. Those berries disappear almost right away. So I imagine it's all sorts of birds that eat fruit that are feasting on them. It looks like a lot of people have seen cedar waxwings on cedars. You know, some people on the web say that they eat white cedar cones as well, but I've heard others say that's not true. So I don't know, you'll have to look. And a lot of people, it looks like, are commenting that mountain ash berries. That's true. That's why I talked about them first, because I think they're the most loved. Anything with red fruit will be a favorite of cedar waxwings. It looks like we have some raised hands, except for I don't know how to get to those.
So, yep, I see him here. How about Jim? Did you want to ask a question?
Oh yeah, actually, thanks for the talk. You talked about the animal rehab center that you've worked at. I was curious, what happens if you bring in an animal? How busy are you? Can you give people a sense of the basics there? I know it's a little bit off topic, but I was just curious with all your experience.
How busy we are?
Well, can you bring any animal and?
Oh, absolutely. And every day there's somebody at the desk from, I think, 9 to 6. Sometimes in the summer it's open later. And boy, we get lots of admits every day. So, and the phone calls, they keep a log of all the phone calls, and it's very thick, and all phone calls are returned. So you leave a message and somebody will return your call and help you through whatever problem you have. So enormous number of resources as well.
Okay.
What were you, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was thinking you'd be so overwhelmed that you might have to turn people away. That's what I was. But apparently,
You know, the only time people get turned away, I wouldn't call it turning them away, but if
Right.
somebody finds a bunch of babies, for example, in their yard, and there's a way to keep them there so that the parents can find them or whatever, especially baby bunnies, the parents only come twice a day, or the
Okay.
mother only comes twice a day. And so a lot of times we get in nests of baby bunnies that were just disturbed when somebody was raking. So they might say, please try to put them back.
Yeah.
and then put a few twigs on top of the nest and see if it doesn't get disturbed, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Thank you.
And it looks like we have one more question and then we could move on to our next one, but Carol.
So I guess mine's more of a comment. We have so damn many squirrels that our pagoda dogwood, no bird ever gets to it because the squirrels do. And all of our other dogwoods. I mean, we don't stand a chance. Any thoughts on those? I can't shoot them.
I'm with you on that. And my showy mountain ash, this year, the raccoons climbed up and broke all the branches off trying to get the fruit. So it happens.
Yes, we're growing plums now too. And nope, we never saw it mature. Just a comment, so.
Well, at least you're supporting the food chain, Carol.
Oh, yes, we are. Bless us.
Well, thank you. I guess I passed the baton to somebody else.
Thank you so much, Erica. I was circling the names of things that I don't have in my yard, like, oh, that's what I'm going to put in this year. Keep adding, but happy that I have a lot of pagoda and other things. So now we turn to natural shore technologies. You guys, we've been saying North Shore technologies. We've been saying native shore technologies. We've been confused, even though we are not confused about it. We just somehow say the wrong word, but we're really pleased that you're here tonight to tell us more about weeds. So I have this order that it's going to be, oh, I just tapped the wrong thing. Hang on. You guys will know. So Sarah, are you going to start it off?
Yep, I'll start it off.
Okay. And is your last name Kvit?
Yep, Kavit.
Kavit. I love it. That was a lot of consonants. But welcome and thank you for being here tonight, you guys. And then if you just want to pass the baton on to Martina and Tracy, as would make sense, okay?
Sure, sounds good.
Thanks so
thank you
much.
for having us tonight. All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Sarah, and I am a maintenance manager for Natural Shore Technologies. Today, I will be talking to you about weed control strategies in native plantings. My colleagues, Martina and Tracy, are also a part of the maintenance team at Natural Shore, and they are also presenting this evening. Our company designs, installs, and maintains ecological restorations throughout the 7-county metro area. We also have a retail native plant nursery located in Independence, as Erica mentioned. Native plantings are often described as low maintenance, which compared to traditional turf grass lawns, they generally are. However, native plantings do require regular maintenance because weeds are constantly being spread by wind, water, animals, and people. Conducting maintenance on a monthly basis is usually sufficient to keep the weeds at bay. The definition of a weed varies a little bit from person to person, but in general, we can describe it as a plant that is growing where it is not wanted. Keep in mind that this could be an invasive, non-native, or even an aggressive native species. Correctly identifying weeds is crucial in deciding what needs to be done to control them. Priority should be given to poisonous plants such as poison ivy, poison hemlock, and wild parsnip, especially if present in areas used by people. You should prioritize weeds based on when they flower and go to seed, so controlling early blooming weeds like yellow rocket before worrying about later blooming weeds like thistle. The life cycle of a weed and how it spreads should also be considered. Biennials will spend a year in the rosette stage and then bolt in the second year, so you may have more time to work on those. Preventing weeds from going to seed is key in reducing their spread, but some weeds, such as reed canary grass, may also spread by creeping roots called rhizomes. The main weed control strategies I'll be talking about are mowing, hand pulling, and spraying. Mowing works well on weeds prior to or during flowering. It can delay or even prevent the plant from flowering, as well as prevent seed from maturing. The soil contains a seed bank of both native and non-native species, and some weed seeds may persist for several decades. Hand pulling is best for weeds that have already flowered and went to seed. You'll need to compost these plants to ensure those seeds don't add to the seed bank. And when you're hand pulling plants, they can disturb the soil, which can in turn stir up more seeds from that seed bank. Herbicide application is another tool used in weed control. It is useful in controlling invasive species and weeds that are not affected by mowing or are difficult to hand pull. Be sure to read the label and follow all the instructions for proper use. So now I will show some examples of these strategies. First, we have a wetland that has a reed canary grass invasion. Reed canary flowers in June, so we use weed whips to mow it down and prevent it from seeding. It also spreads aggressively by rhizomes, so in the fall we sprayed it with herbicide. Here's another example of using a weed whip to spot mow Canada goldenrod and prairie cordgrass on a shoreline. This sets back these more aggressive native plants and allows room for other natives to establish and increase biodiversity. Hand pulling weeds is important for removing those that have gone to seed, especially those with pesky, sticky seeds like this burdock. The parsnip predator is a great tool for removing these stubborn taprooted weeds, and it's basically a shovel with a sharp blade on the end. So you don't even have to dig out the whole taproot as long as you cut it below the surface, cutting that root crown. Hand pulling weeds is a great way to maintain a more formal look, but it can be more time consuming and labor intensive. This shoreline restoration is along a walking path in a homeowners association. So weeds are being hand pulled to make it look less messy and a bit more formal. Now on to herbicide application. This is a large prairie and wetland restoration with several invasive species present, including spotted knapweed, Canada thistle, and bird's foot trefoil. None of these species respond well to mowing, and it is too large of an area to hand pull everything. So using a selective broadleaf herbicide with a backpack sprayer was the most efficient strategy in controlling these species. Another method of herbicide application is hand wicking. This strategy uses less herbicide than a backpack sprayer, and it greatly reduces collateral damage to other plants. We most often use this method for invasive species like cattail, reed canary grass, and Phragmites. Be sure to use an aquatic safe herbicide when applying to near water. And finally, herbicide application is useful when cutting and treating volunteer trees, and this prevents them from resprouting. It can be done with a spray bottle or a sponge dauber, and you'll want to make sure you cover the entire cut surface, especially the cambium, to avoid resprouts. And I know that was a pretty quick overview, so I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. And I also wanted to let you know that we do have a monthly newsletter that we put out, and you can sign up for that on our website.
Sarah, one question came through. Does
Yeah.
hand wicking work on garlic mustard that has gone to seed?
No, garlic mustard is a biennial. So once it goes to seed, the plant dies.
Any other questions from folks? I don't see any in the chat. If you have questions, also feel free to raise your hand or unmute too. Joe's just wondering if you can explain a little more about hand wicking.
Yeah, sure. I'll go back to this slide. So hand wicking, you have your chemical gloves on, those go up to your elbows roughly. And then you put a cotton glove over that chemical glove. Use a spray bottle to spray herbicide right on that cotton glove. And then you just wipe the plant, making sure that you cover the whole leaf surface. So by doing this, you're only applying herbicide directly to the leaf. As compared to like spraying with a backpack, you would have some runoff and some spray that would hit other non-target plants.
Great. Two more pop through. Can you give an example of where you would use an aquatic herbicide?
Yeah, so we use aquatic herbicide whenever we are applying it on plants that are in the water, like cattail, or even that are out of the water, but maybe right along a shoreline, like reed canary grass or that Phragmites.
Got two more here. Let's do them. Jim is just wondering if you could give sort of a breakdown of clients in terms of like homeowners versus local governments, companies.
Yeah, so we do serve homeowners throughout the metro. We also are contracted through watershed districts and cities. So we have a wide variety of clients, as well as different sizes of sites. It could just be a small shoreline on a lake, or it could be a multi-acre wetland easement.
Great. And then Eric, I saw you had your hand up. Did you have a question too? We could do that and then move on.
Just kind of curious. Thanks for your presentation, Sarah. I was just wondering if you've ever done battle with bouncing bet. It's also known as wild sweet William. It's sometimes can be kind of stubborn along, take over kind of shorelines. I was just wondering if you ever done battle with something like that.
Yeah, we have encountered that one, not very frequently, and usually we'll hand pull it to prevent it from seeding. I'm not sure. Tracy might have a little more experience on this.
Maybe like multiple seasons of
Yeah, the key is to prevent it from seeding, and if you can dig out that root to just physically remove the plant, that can be helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say too, Sarah, that it's mostly about hand pulling, I think, when we get those infestations of that one. So it's a battle though.
Like, yeah, like kind of timing, kind of good timing, and a lot of kind of hand pulling.
Yep, and a lot of patience for sure. So.
All right, any others?
Yeah, we'll do one more here. Is cutting and containing garlic mustard seeds beneficial, and can they put in like a county yard waste site?
Yes, yep. If you have garlic mustard that has flowered and gone to seed, or even just flowered, sometimes garlic mustard can produce seed after it is hand pulled. You should bring that to a compost site, and usually those sites, the compost gets hot enough to destroy those seeds.
There should be a list of those specific compost sites that get hot enough to destroy the seed. I think it's on the Department of Ag website, or the Minnesota Department of Agriculture website. So we tend to gather those up and take them to those specific sites when we hand pull garlic mustard.
Yeah, as well as other invasive species.
Yep.
Great. Sarah, did you want to pass it on, or looks like
Yeah, next up we have Martina.
I will share my screen. All right, so hello everybody. My name is Martina, and today I'm going to be talking about 4 very common invasive plants we have here in Minnesota. First and foremost, I just want to say a thank you to Wild Ones for hosting these amazing get-togethers and also just advocating for native plants. So hopefully my presentation will help you in executing control of these species and maybe even being a review for those of you in the process. So first, I just want to lay out some definitions. This definition comes from the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, and they have certain designations and categories for invasive species determined by a certain invasive plant community. It is important to note that they are regulated and there are certain laws in place to prevent their spread and keep them contained. Another thing to note is that these lists can change year to year based on their known distribution, among other factors. So, and also I highly recommend checking out that Department of Agriculture website to become familiar with these species and just knowing the current lists. So some things to keep in mind and pursue. So what I mean by prioritizing is that we want to observe our managed areas in our gardens for invasive species, and you want to focus on those early detection species. So by early detection, I mean species who are just starting to establish. You want to try to eradicate those as soon as possible so it doesn't become a bigger problem. And Sarah talked a lot about integrated pest management in her presentation. It's really just combining methods of control for the best results. And I'm not by any means a graphic designer, but here, so let's say this colony is an infestation of Canada thistle. And these arrows could be individual Canada thistle plants. We want to first eliminate those outliers so they don't become a colony like the one in the background. And probably the most important thing to keep in mind is patience. Control is usually a multiple year process, and they're invasive for a reason. They have no checks in place except us. So our first species, probably one you most are familiar with, is Canada thistle. As you can see by the distribution map, it is highly present in our state. And a big problem with this one is the enormous rhizomes. They can have a 10 to 12 foot spread in a season. That is a lot of growth for one season. So some keys of control for this one is that it's almost impossible to control without systemic herbicides. You really need to be hitting that root growth hard. And this is the case for most perennial invasive species. They need to be hit with that chemical so the root can die back. Our next species, another one we are probably familiar with, as it was talked in Sarah's talk. This one, as mentioned, is a biennial and takes residence in our woodlands. We have seen the species in full sun with adequate moisture though, which is pretty scary. A good way to identify this one is if you crush the leaves, it will give off a garlic scent. Some say it resembles violets. As you can see in the upper left-hand corner, a rosette kind of resembles the violet leaf. And as you can see, this is a big infestation, scary stuff. So with this infestation, you would want to be mowing down those flowers to prevent seed production, as it is a biennial, and it will flower and die. And if you can get rid of that seed production, then you'll have good control. So keys of control, I reviewed most of these, but also you want to monitor for dormant seed in the bank popping up after you achieve control. The third one is crown vetch. This one was actually brought to the United States for erosion control along roadways. I believe the distribution map is a little off. It's present in a lot more counties than what we are seeing. Another battle with the root system, creeping roots that spread up to 10 feet. We do have a lot of native and non-native species of vetch in Minnesota, but this one is quite easy to identify by the globe-like clusters of flowers. And so you are going to want to mow or cut this one May through October to prevent that seed production. And again, systemic herbicides are kind of an essential multiple year process. And last but not least, we have Japanese knotweed. This one has an enormous root spread, as most invasives do. It also can propagate from stem fragments. So at just half an inch, they can hit the ground and produce a new plant. So here we have a couple of examples of infestations. As you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, it can actually grow through foundations and crack building foundations, and that can be a huge problem. So keys of control for this one, definitely avoid mowing it. That will just spread the fragments to other places. You do not want that. And properly disposing of those plant parts. So you're going to either want to put them in a black plastic bag and let them bake in the sun to desiccate, or bring them to a city compost. As Tracy mentioned, check out the Minnesota Department of Agriculture website for that list. And again, multiple year process. So here we are. In order to sustain these native plant ecosystems and our gardens, we need to know their enemies, and we need to become familiar with them and their methods of control. The unfortunate fact is that most species present in our unmanaged areas are these invasive species, and they were introduced by our ancestors knowingly or unknowingly, so we have this obligation to control them. It's not only governmental law, but it is also for our native plant communities' integrity, biodiversity, and our own sanity. And with that, thank you so much for letting me speak today. If you have any questions about either the plants I talked about today or others, certainly feel free to contact me. I would love to recommend suggestions and advice. And thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Martina. We had one comment. So every hike you go on, bring a weed whip. And then a question about, would you recommend planting annual cover crops like buckwheat, oats, Italian radish, kind of et cetera, to prevent these weeds from spreading?
Okay, so the first question, I'm sorry, what was the first question?
Oh, the first one, I think it was a little more tongue in cheek about bringing a weed whip on all your hikes.
Well, when I do see invasive plants when I'm on a hike, I do sometimes just rip them out. I do not like seeing them on the landscape. And as far as planting annual cover crops, I would recommend using more of a native cover crop, such as Canada wild rye. It's definitely important to cover that ground after removal to prevent a huge seed bank coming up, because usually invasive plants will be the ones coming up if you remove all that and have that bare ground.
Great, thank you. That's all I see right now. So if you want to pass it on.
Awesome. So Tracy will be next.
Share my screen now. I think hopefully everyone can hear me. Thanks, Martina. Thank you everyone for having us today. I'm another maintenance crew coordinator at Natural Shore, and today I'm going to talk about some of the common client concerns that we run into. These might be clients that are new to native plants or clients that have had restorations for several years. And these might be concerns that you're familiar with, or when you're talking to people and advocating for native plants, maybe they come to you with some of these concerns. And these are just some ways that we answer these questions that come to us. So hopefully this is helpful to everybody. Oh no. Okay, so the first one we come across a lot is it looks really messy. For our new native plant clients, I think sometimes they expect it to be more like their previous traditional gardening and things staying in tight clumps. Unfortunately, or fortunately for us, I mean, we're pretty happy about this, but a lot of our plants spread out. They don't always stay in tight clumps. They spread by those rhizomes, and by August, things kind of look tall and a little bit jungle-like. So when people say, you know, it looks messy, we recommend to them that maybe they add a border. It can be a simple thing like this rock border here in the lower picture, or a grass border around turf grass, just mowing around the circumference of the restoration. We also recommend mowing or having paths to walk through your restoration. This adds a little bit of definition and brings like kind of the chaos into focus a little bit by having these walking paths through the restoration. And also that way they can kind of embrace the restoration a little bit more by walking through and just focusing less on how quote unquote messy things look, and instead focus on their different observations like the flowers and insects that they see. You can install native plants that stay in clumps, but that really limits the plant list. So we often try to get people to embrace this look versus the more traditional and, you know, neat plantings that they had before, like you know, just their rose garden or something. So staying with the kind of messy theme, a lot of times people will come to us and say that their natives or their neighbors aren't being very supportive of their restoration. Their neighbors might not be quite on our bandwagon yet with natives, and they will talk about how they wish it was back to turf grass. And so we try to tell our people to put signs up that kind of explain what's going on and answer questions. That really helps quite a bit if they have signs that maybe say this is for a rusty patch bumblebee habitat, or maybe they have a rain garden and it's talking about the ecological services that our natives are providing. That really helps quite a bit. We also tell our clients that a lot of our native plants don't really know what a property boundary is. So what we like to do is maybe have a turf grass border, couple feet, just keep that mowed so that your rhizomes from your native plants aren't creeping into your neighbor's yard. A lot of times, once our clients start sharing their observations, maybe they find a cool little bird nest, or, you know, see baby turtles in their restoration, or migrating birds move through. If they share those observations with their neighbors, and that kind of gets them excited as well. So definitely keep your eyes open, be willing to share with your neighbors what you're seeing, and that really gets people on board pretty quickly. Also in these urban areas, like Sarah and Martina were saying, you're going to run into a lot of weeds. Even if you've had this restoration for several years, things get blown in, birds bring things in. So definitely don't stop maintenance. Keep things like this thistle from going to seed, and that really helps a lot. A lot of our clients also expect things to stay quite the same every year. So going into our projects, we really try to tell them that it's going to change, and it doesn't stay static like some of their previous formal gardens. There's competition happening. There's natural physiology of the plants. Like I mentioned, there can be rhizomatous, so they move around, they migrate. A lot of times when we plant it's less of a science and more of an art, and we might plant things where we think that they're going to work out, but they have other plans and they might move further upland than we thought they were going to, or they move further downland, and they'll find their niche. And so just sometimes the client wants things to stay in nice little clumps of color, purple here, yellow there, and that doesn't always work out. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're talking to your friends about native plants, that they will do what kind of they want to do. And we like to tell people that there's different stars each year, which makes it really exciting to have a native planting. I think last year, despite the drought, butterfly milkweed really did great. And so that was really exciting. The year before that, I think sneezeweed did great. So just because something does really well one year doesn't mean it necessarily will do well the next year after that. And just to kind of keep that in mind, that you're going to see different things do well each season, which is exciting for us. So we really try to tell people to embrace change, and just everything's, normal, and the plants are going to figure it out, and just take a breath and just embrace it. For example, here's a planting that we had the first year, and this is at a local HOA, and everyone was super excited to see this because there was, mulch down, plants that were in tight clumps, and they thought it just looked really great. But then the second year things started spreading. We got really excited about this. There's still beautiful flowers blooming, but they kind of got a little bit scared because things got, outside the formal clumps that they were originally put into, and they started spreading out. And we just kind of told people it'll be fine. You'll still, see lots of different things in here. Just give it a second. And then this is the third year where everything's blooming. Things really moved around and spread out, but they're very excited to see a planting like this. They see tons of bees and butterflies. We actually saw quite a few rusty patch bumblebees this year, and they really love it. But there was a kind of a transitional period where they were really worried, and they've really definitely embraced the change at this site. So we're really excited to work with them. One thing that they often talk about, though, is that they don't see a certain plant. And I think something that you should mention to people is that even though a lot of these native plants are perennials, some of them are short-lived perennials, or sometimes they need a little bit of encouragement, like cardinal flower, like we were talking about before. If you can kind of open up some room for them. Sometimes when things fill in those areas, they outcompete other natives. So what we do sometimes is mow down certain natives that have gotten too aggressive to maintain that biodiversity. So maybe, for example, bergamot's getting too aggressive. We might mow that a little bit just so other things can come up underneath it. Oftentimes, if you selectively weed whip certain species like bergamot or Joe Pye weed or other things that have gotten up maybe too tall and shaded out other things, those plants will still bloom, but maybe bloom shorter. So Joe Pye weed, sometimes we cut down in June or July, and then it'll still bloom, but it'll bloom at a couple feet instead of 6 feet. And it would be our preference to just kind of let everything grow the way it wants to and work it out itself. But we kind of work on a different timetable than the plants do. If it were up to us, we would just kind of let things go, and in 20-40 years it would eventually find its way and look more like a remnant restoration. But our clients kind of want to see instant gratification, instant change. So sometimes we help things along a little bit and cut things down. Another thing to keep in mind is things like black-eyed Susan. We put those in a higher concentration in our seed mixes. So you can see in this picture, there's a large stand of black-eyed Susan. We call those early successional species. Martina was talking about one earlier, the Canada wild rye, and we want those to really jump up fast and crowd out those non-native species and invasive species. And then, so they jump up, and after a couple of years, they start to diminish. And our clients sometimes get worried when they see less blooms, like this less black-eyed Susan. And we try to encourage them that, you know, now the grasses are establishing and the other plants are establishing, and that biodiversity is really the key that we're looking for. So it's okay. And if there is a plant that you really do want to have back in your restoration, we often will just replant it if it died off, or sometimes we try something different, maybe in the same family, but a different plant that didn't really work out before, we'll try something different. And sometimes we like to introduce larger plants to an established restoration. We do advocate for a lot of seed collecting and spreading, but sometimes to just give a plant more of a head start, we sell these larger plants just so they don't get crowded out by some of those aggressive other native plants. One that we unfortunately run into a lot is our clients not liking grasses. They just want to see big, vibrant patches of color. They want to see more flowers, and we really have to stress to them the importance of native grasses. Some people that maybe aren't quite on board with natives think that they're all grass. I mean, that they're, you know, the grasses won't stay in tight clumps or they'll take over. But a lot of our grasses we do use as border. So if you're advocating for native plants, I would say, and somebody who just wants things in tight groups, that grasses are a good way to go for that. A lot of people don't know that a lot of our butterflies and moths use grasses as their nesting habitat. So it's important to have those on a landscape if you're a big insect person and want to have a restoration for habitat. They also help prevent the taller plants from flopping over. That's a big concern we get from a lot of clients. They don't like how things get tall and flop over. And if you add some grasses in there, it really helps for some structure of the restoration. Also benefits like a lot of our restorations are on hill slopes, very steep hill slopes, or they're on a shoreline that is eroding. So those grasses and their roots systems go really deep down and help stabilize that that soil structure. So that's helpful. And right now, in the winter, you know, things are usually pretty white and not a lot of color, but our grasses out here are just super vibrant. They change from that minty green color on the left picture to these coppery reds, these really beautiful colors. So if our clients want a lot of winter interest, we recommend grasses. And going into winter, a lot of our clients want us to cut things down and kind of clean it up for the winter, like they maybe do for their other garden beds that aren't native. But we tell people to keep everything standing, especially now when things have been so frigid and cold. I'm really glad that we have these restorations out there on the landscape for all the critters that need that habitat. It's also really pretty in the winter to look at some of this stuff, and it provides a lot of great snowman making material. So highly recommend keeping those up throughout the season. That's all I had today. That was a lot of information. Thank you for having Natural Shore with you this evening. And just another plug for our newsletter. We try to really keep it an educational newsletter with a lot of information that you've heard tonight, a lot of information about invasive species and natives, as well as insects. So definitely run over to our website and check that out if you are interested in our newsletter. Thanks again. And I will take questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Tracy. I didn't see any come through, but if people have some, oh, I see Rachel has her hand up. Rachel, if you want to unmute.
I have two questions. Thank you so much for doing this. It was really informative. I appreciate that. The first question that I have is I have a probably 65-year-old crabapple tree in my front yard and have grass, which I hate mowing, throughout the front yard. And I'm just wondering, are there any grasses that you could recommend that would work really well to plant, not around the trunk, but around it's basically my entire front yard is under the canopy of this crabapple tree. And I would like to put something of more interest there. And I like grasses, so I was just looking for some recommendations.
Oh, great. Yeah.
On the
Yeah,
first.
we really like Cytodsgrama is a good one if it's a pretty dry area or sandy. Little blue stem can get a little bit taller, but is also a really nice one. Blue grama is pretty short, but that one kind of spreads out and makes a nice little bed underneath trees quite often. So that's a really nice one. And yeah, like Eric says, sedges too are super helpful underneath trees. There's a lot of variety out there for sedges. So that's a good, I think Springle sedge is one we use quite a bit. I don't know if we have any that we've planted under crab apples, but I can't imagine Springle sedge really likes it under a variety of conditions. That's kind of our go-to for sedges. So that would be a good one I'd recommend.
And could I recommend something too? So if you're willing to have a forb, wild strawberry would be a great plant for that site. It's kind of acts as a ground cover. It's got small white flowers. They're important for early insects, and that'd be also a good one to consider.
Cool. The other question that I have is I have maybe like a 1.5 foot border between my driveway and a neighbor's chain link fence that had a bunch of also really mature buckthorn that I have since cut and applied herbicide to. But underneath the buckthorn, there was a bunch of, I think it's called wandering bellflower or something like that.
Bellflower.
Yeah, which are
bellflower.
Horrific. And I understand how to get rid of it, which is just a lot of digging and getting rid of those huge tap roots and like whatever the things that put off of it. But basically what I'm asking is the soil that's there though is like super compacted. It's got a lot of roots from the buckthorn that I'm, waiting to kind of starve off. Is there anything native that I can plant in that space to help open up the soil a little bit or help with the process of breaking down all of the old things that are there?
Yeah, there's a lot of natives that have surprisingly strong root systems that can break through compacted soil, and then also really like soil that is disturbed or maybe nutrient poor. Grasses would be a good one for that, like the ones we mentioned earlier. Bergamot, I think, would do well in pretty much any situation. And in that case too, sometimes bergamot is helpful because it shades out some of those invasive species. You're going to have to dig a lot to get that European bellflower out. But after that, if there's any little tiny bellflower that comes up after that, the bergamot can sometimes help shade that out or keep it suppressed.
Yeah.
And bergamots can be kind of aggressive, so it can put up with other aggressive things like that European bellflower. Trying to think of other natives that would do well in disturbed soils. I would say there's also the purple prairie clover really likes nutrient poor soils or soils that have been disturbed, and they have longer taproots too that can get down into the soil. And I guess it would depend too on the exposure, if it's full sun or part shade, or dry and wet. So I would kind of stick with some grasses and just give those a shot, and some sedges as well. And then any kind of aggressive rhizomatous native forb like bergamot.
Okie dokie, thank you.
Hope that helps.
I haven't seen any other questions come through. Does anyone else have any? Oh, looks like Eric.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, thanks for your share, Tracy, and all your knowledge. Have you ever like used like large leaf aster as a plant to compete against that creeping bellflower? That I'll take your answer.
Yeah, oh gosh, we really love large leaf aster. And that one, like Martina mentioned with the wild strawberry, it can form a ground cover. So that's super helpful when we're trying to take up every single square inch of area. So there's no room for those invasive species to kind of pop up. And I think that the large leaf is a real rock star when it comes to that aster. So I think that one likes a little bit more sandy soil or woodland soils too, and more shade, but it's a really pretty leaf, especially in the fall. It starts to change color a little bit too. And so that one is definitely one that I would always recommend.
I'll add that creeping bellflower leaves look very similar to large leaf aster leaves, especially early in the season. So you got to get a really good feel for what they look like side by side. So when you're continuing to remove that creeping bellflower, that you're not taking out the large leaf aster.
Yeah. I think someone asked if woodland phlox is aggressive. And I wouldn't say that is one I would characterize as too aggressive. I know that there's other phlox species that are pretty aggressive. One we run into a lot is just the garden phlox that's not native. But we do have woodland phlox, and I wouldn't categorize that as an aggressive native in our experience. It always depends on the site though. So sometimes they just go crazy even when you don't expect them to.
Awesome. Thank you, Tracy.
Yeah. And I can stop sharing my screen now.
And then Eva, do you want to
Hey,
talk
Eric.
about final plans here?
I unmuted. Hey, Eric and I were just texting a little bit while this was going on. It's 8:30 and we've had such great presentations tonight. We're really thrilled. And we're thinking of maybe saving Eric's special edition of plant families for another meeting. Does that sound good to you, Eric, or what do you think?
Yeah, that works just fine for me. It's a relatively quick one, so I could do it at the start of a future meeting. If anyone is really dying for it, shoot
Wait,
me an email or something.
This would be our second year of the tradition of the plant family quiz. It's special, but it is 8:30, so we really want to honor you guys' time. We had a great night. I personally just love the lightning talks, but they make me the most nervous. When I just have one presenter, it's like it works or it doesn't. But when there's 6, I'm here going, oh, I hope it works out. And it really did tonight, everyone. Thank you so much. And I'm not even on my video here. Sorry, I'm yakking away. So thank you, guys. I want to just comment on the embrace the messy. I'm all about that. And I think the suggestions you guys gave us, everyone from Natural Shore, thank you so much. It was really wonderful to have you with us tonight. Yay, clapping. Excellent. And thank you to Erica. I'm going to be looking for those cedar waxwings. It was wonderful. I added to my plants, want to be list, want to have list. Oh, and you guys back on Natural Shore, Tracy, thank you on I have some creeping bellflower. Just to have a strategy is making me really happy. I'm pulling those little buggers out and getting the junk under the soil, but they come back if I have someone to help me compete with them. That sounds very good. And then thank you again, especially to John Kramer, our seed star. Looking forward to our seed exchange. We are anti-jumping worms. We are pro seed exchange. So that'll be a fun event in February. Any last words, Eric, or anyone?
I don't think so. Just, yeah, echoing what so many people have said. Great presentations. Fabulous, everyone. I really enjoyed it too.
Yeah, it was a great night, everyone. Thank you. We'll see you again in February, and then we'll be together a couple times. And we are not doing, oh, I didn't mention this. We generally do our Wild Ones walks, which we call WOWs, you guys, where we go for hikes. It's a way to get together during the pandemic outdoors. The seed exchange is going to be our WOW for February. March, we'll do another WOW. So look for that on the schedule. Thank you so much and have a good night.
Thanks, Eva.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Good night.